These are the original bubbles that Bob assigned me last year. There are 5 major key bubbles that were assigned to me that I will go in more detail. The 5 bubbles were research, larger-than-life experiments, my YouTube channel, a bubble called Science Guy, where I taught different classes, and tutoring. Let's start with the research. For my research, I was given to watch 4 documentaries, 5 books to read, interviewing 7 professional contacts, and 10 digital type information to research. Starting with my interviews, I interviewed Danny Duquette, a physics teacher that taught students science all around the world. Mr. Duquette was one of the bases of how I approached my project. He allowed me to understand what makes students intrigued with the study of science and how to get them to see the world in a scientific mind. He made me understand that it's not the flashy experiments that gets people's attention, but it's the curiosity that makes them want to learn. Albert Joseph is a graduate student who studies the microscopic flow of water. And Henry Jackson, another graduate student, studying the theoretical theories of gravity. I also had the opportunity to interview Sean Devan, a former Grace Prep staff that taught math and is now studying different types of scans, like the MRI, CT, and X-rays. I also interviewed Cody Masick, a graduate student studying general relativity and the bending of space-time. Brian Clegg, a physicist and an author of one of my books that relates physics to our anatomy. Finally, Karthik Srinivas, who is a graduate student at Penn State and also my mentor. As for the research for my book, I read Storm in a Teacup. This book was one of the key books that I read for my project. The book is about the physics that can be found in our everyday lives and how these physics concepts can affect the way we live. An example that I like that this book points out is that the reason why your glasses fog up when it's humid is because of the surface tension of water. The surface tension of water allows it to stick to the surface of the glass. This is the reason why we use dish soap and water to wash dishes. By weakening the surface tension of water with dish soap, it allows the water to smear into the oil on the dish and get it off easier. Like this, the book is filled with everyday examples that we can observe in our lives that can be related to physics in some way. The next book is called Stuff Matters, and this book is similar to the previous book in the term that it deals with the science that can be found in everyday lives, but this book exclusively talks about the materials around our world. For example, the science behind why stainless steel is stainless, or how carbon can become diamond under certain circumstances. The Brief History of Time is a book that deals with some of the physics that govern our universe and how they play in certain situations. The Big Picture is a book that talks about physics but in a more philosophical lens. Finally, The Universe Inside You is a book about the physics that can be found in the human body. For the documentaries, I saw The Genius of Einstein, where it demonstrates the life of Einstein and the story of how he came up with the idea of special and general relativity. I enjoyed this documentary because of how it illustrated the whole life of Einstein, not just his work. Quantum Theory is a documentary that introduces the basis of quantum theory and explores some of the crazy ideas that the study provides. Let There Be Life is a documentary that explores the science in the biology that can be found in our planet, like explaining the science behind how a migrating bird knows exactly where they are and how they can navigate to their intended location without getting lost. Science vs. God was an interesting documentary as it showed both sides of the debate concerning the topic of science and God. It showcases different scientists talking about how God cannot be real, and at the same time showcases different religious leaders that talks about their belief. I really enjoyed this documentary as it displays certain people's thoughts on the most important questions in life. I also liked how the scientists would disregard the belief of God completely and reject it, while the religious leaders view that the subject of science, that is, science actually proves the existence of God. For my digital research, I have had to have 10 digital type information that I researched. I watched 5 TED Talks and viewed 5 different types of YouTube channels. My research on the YouTube channels helped me with my own YouTube channel, as I was able to not only learn how to film and edit my videos, but also learned how to approach people online and get their attention and make them watch your videos. One of the channels that I want to talk about is the channel called Veritasium, where the YouTuber, Derek, uses the misconceptions that people have in science to get their attention and teach them about science. I've learned and seen how this way of learning is effective and make science memorable. This was also how I came up with the idea of doing a street physics type video for my YouTube channel. Another website that I use for my channel is called Science Bob. This website is a website that showcases a variety of experiments that anyone can do in their house. By utilizing items that can be found in any household, the website has many instructions to different experiments that I use for my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is another major bubble that I had to complete for my project. Since I was a child, I love making videos with my friends and editing them. However, the excitement that I get from sharing my videos to different people and seeing their reaction to what I spent so much time on is unforgettable. I believe this is why I proposed this YouTube channel idea to Bob, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to share what I love to the internet. The meaning of my channel is to have the opportunity to share and connect with the people online about some of the things that I found were exciting when I first learned science. The goal that I set for myself was a video per week, which came up to be around 30 videos by the time I present. I was able to achieve this goal, and as of today, I have 30 videos, 56 subscribers, and 584 views in total. The name of my channel is DSL, which stands for Don't Stop Learning, and is targeted to students who are struggling with science. This channel aims to introduce fun and exciting science concepts that students can easily understand and provoke critical thinking so that students feel more comfortable with the study of science and grow their scientific minds. As much as I want to show you all of my videos, I'm afraid that it will take too much time. Instead, I brought you a video that I did for one of my all-school seminars. Enjoy.
My second all-school seminar about gravity. So if you raise something up, like a really heavy sandbag or something, like or a giant tire that weighs 300 pounds, is getting punched by a karate punch 38 times at the same time, simultaneously, in the face. So, I hope you guys...
I like to point out that after the last object survived, we talked about why it didn't break. And I remember saying that when the table is placed on the side like that, it requires much more force to break it, as it is much more efficient at taking the force and transferring it because of its small surface area of contact with the wheel. This can be seen in the slow motion as the wheel itself bounces off of the table, spreading all of the force to the ground. Like this, I love how we can learn about the impact force required to break different objects in a gravity experiment. The larger-than-life experiments were another major objective that I needed to complete. This required 3 experiments that I had to conduct in front of the school that are more complicated to conduct in a normal household environment. The first experiment that I conducted was an experiment that demonstrated the power of pulleys. I used a pulley to lift up an object that was heavy to lift and exhibited how much easier it is to lift up the object with the use of a pulley. I explained that these tools, like the pulley, are called a simple machine that allows us to lift up objects that we never could have imagined of lifting. The second experiment that I conducted for this bubble is the gravity experiment with the wheel destruction. I brought in different objects and dropped the wheel to see if the wheel would break the object. I also calculated the force that the wheel would deliver to the object in order to give the students an idea of how strong the wheel really is. My third and final experiment was a demonstration of air pressure. I crushed many different objects by heating them up and quickly dunking them in cold water, which allowed the air pressure all around us to crush the object with 22,000 pounds of force. I was faced with an obstacle with this experiment for my final item. I was faced with an obstacle with this experiment, as for my final item, I was planning on crushing a 10-gallon drum barrel. Because of the weather being extremely cold, not allowing the barrel to heat up to the temperature required, my experiment failed, and I was only able to show the students a couple of cans and bottles getting crushed. However, after all my all-school seminar, I was able to make the experiment work as well as film it. I would like to use this time to show the students how the experiment really should have been like.
Let's go, dude. Boom! Just explodes. The whole thing.
What's up, guys? It's me again. Today, we're gonna try this experiment one more time. I know it didn't work last time, but this time I got a better fire source, and I think it's gonna work. So, yeah, tune in for more. Okay, guys. So the basic idea of this is, as I explained in the last video, we're gonna boil a little bit of water that's in here right now, and so this is boiling right now. It's quite hot as well, and we just gotta cool it down really quick. And what's the perfect material to use? Then snow, right? So we dug up a little hole right here, and so we're just gonna lift it up, put it in here, and we got some cold water here as well. And we're gonna dump in the cold water, and let's see what happens. Carry this over. I'm gonna pour some water into it. Okay guys, I think the barrel is cooked up and ready to go right now. And so I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna screw in the top and I'll bring it out. So just wait 1 sec. Alright guys, we got some water here. I'm gonna just pour it. Let's see if it works. Let's see if this works. Please work.
Get the side closest to me more.
Okay guys, one last try. Let's give this a go. That's hot. That was very hot. Holy moly, that was hot.
Give it a good whack.
This is for all the times that you didn't want to implode.
Harder, man. Just go for it. Full blast, man.
Oh my gosh! That was loud. Ow, my ears. Dude, it worked! My ears! I'm so happy. Oh my god. Oh, it's still going. Gosh,
Hold it up. Hold up your trophy.
Look at this thing. Oh.
Show us the eggs.
The eggs! Okay, so I think one of the most fundamental thing that was wrong with all of my attempts is not getting the barrel itself hot enough. And so I'm just gonna demonstrate how hot you need to make your barrel with this piece of egg. Okay, so it has to be hot enough for you to cook scrambled eggs here. So, you know, just go around, you know, take some of this. Yeah, that's really hot. Oh. Yeah, we should have hit it. Yeah, that worked. The last try, it worked.
I really enjoyed making this video because I was able to show all the different variations that I tried to make this experiment to work. Many videos on YouTube won't explain in detail how they were able to make the experiment to work, and I believe that my video was much more informative than other videos where it just showed the experiment working. This is one of the quotes that I got from Abby Galliano for one of my experiments. Out of the 3 of Jung's all-school seminars, I enjoyed this one the most. The wheel of destruction was an excellent example of gravity in the real world. In addition to being extremely educational, each of the students was out of their seats watching the next item be crushed by the giant wheel. It perfectly exemplified his project about everyday science. This bubble, called the Science Guy, was a bubble that Bob assigned me in order to showcase the interpretation of science in different subjects. I was tasked to teach 8 different classes that don't necessarily have to relate to the subject of science. This was a fun experiment for me, as I have never really taught a class before, and also gave me a new insight into how science can really be connected to everything we know. I taught 4 classes that involved an experiment and 4 classes that were more focused on conceptual science. For my experimental classes, I taught Mrs. Jester's chemistry class about the surface tension of water, Mrs. Quillone's science class about the 3 laws of motion, Mrs. Cole's biology class about the human gene, and Mrs. Canizaro's class that demonstrated some fun experiments that can be done with some balloons. For my conceptual teaching, I taught Mrs. Moyer's AP literature class about the science behind ivory, Mr. Sickery's chemistry class about different chemical reactions, Mr. Gresh's algebra class about the story of gravity, and finally, Mr. Jones' U.S. history class about the science behind World War I. Here are some pictures for that teaching. My last major bubble for my project was tutoring different students and helping them with their respective science classes. My tutoring session were about 40 to 50 minutes long, and I helped the students with homework and tests. I tutored a total of 6 students: Daniel Leslie, Sarah Shearer, Michaela Lay, Jesse Conner, Zoe Gray, and Nora Fisher. These are the span of dates that I taught the 6 students over the year. I was restricted to blue days because I wasn't able to tutor after school because of my schedule, but I was still able to help the students during blue days during my study halls. This was one of the quotes that I got from Sarah Shearer. Jung's tutoring didn't just help me with my assignment, but he was able to give me a new perspective on the subject. He was patient and willing to explain the materials as often as I needed. I asked questions as a way of gaining understanding, and Jung took the time to answer my questions. Throughout this project, time and time again, I have been tested and challenged in some shape or form. One of the biggest challenges that I had over this year has definitely been the production of my YouTube channel. Before all of this started, I thought a video every week would be somewhat possible and a good goal. I was wrong, very wrong. To think that I can come up with an idea, think or write up some sort of script for the video, film the clips, and edit the video in a fun and high quality all in 1 week on top of schoolwork was insane. I soon fell out of schedule and one video a week and started to lag behind. One of the greatest obstacles was the mental barrier that I had set myself up to, where I wanted the videos to look perfect. I would literally spend hours editing, trying to make videos look good, and I soon realized that I have to live up with the fact that I will probably never get a video that will 100% satisfy me. I learned that in life, it's not about the results that is important. It's the development that can be seen over time that is more important. This YouTube channel has definitely pushed me in many aspects, but it has also made me think about who I am as a person. Another humongous learning stretch that I had was the troubles that I had with the two of my all-school seminars. With my gravity experiment, I failed to communicate with Jared and Aaron Burrow about borrowing and setting up the wheel in school. Also, my experiment with the barrel failed and didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. However, I was still able to bring in the wheel and do my experiment by working things out with Jared, and was still able to show my success video of the barrel to the school. I learned that things may not work out the way that you planned, but if you're willing to fix a problem and work towards a solution, then you'll be able to solve any problem that life throws at you. As for the timeline of my project, I have calculated the time that I spent on my research, YouTube channel, my larger-than-life experiments, teaching classes, and my tutoring, and the total hour that I spent came out to be around 300 hours. The legacy that I want to leave behind on my senior project is to show the student body that the subject of science is nothing to be afraid of. In one of my interviews, I learned that the reason why the majority of people feel like science is a hard subject is not that the subject itself is hard, but because they were told by somebody else that science is a hard subject to learn, and thus not for them. This is, I believe, one of the greatest enemies of science and future innovation, because If we don't educate the students to think critically and provoke curiosity, we get adults that still think the earth is flat. This is why I believe science is such an important subject. As said in Proverbs 18:15, the heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. We are all made to seek out knowledge, and by teaching students to acquire knowledge, we are also teaching them to seek wisdom. By teaching them certain science concepts, not only does it teach them to think critically, but it also allows them to look at the world in a scientific lens, which makes them more aware of some of the incredible things that are going on around their simple everyday life. This is why I wanted to focus my project around science in everyday life. It gives me the tools to introduce the subject of science to kids without reluctance. Ultimately, I want to leave a legacy where students can freely think and wonder about the world with a scientific mind and not with formulas and tests. I want to thank my host parents for always being willing to aid me with my silly experiments that I would do in the house, and I also want to thank my mentor Karthik and my advisor Robbie, and finally all of my fellow seniors who were always there to help me with my project. Thank you.
I really don't like doing this. I don't want to email people I don't know or call people I don't know, but you did it. And did you have somebody who is very well known for doing hands-on science?
Hands-on science that you ended up getting to reply and you got an interview with?
I think that was Brian Clay, the author of one of the books that I read. Yeah, he's very known in the physics world because he wrote a bunch of books, and he's known for bringing in the ideas of physics into our everyday lives.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I thought that was a good stretch for you to just reach out and contact people that you don't know and have some really good success with that. I worked with you on all those college applications
And still completely stay on track with this, and use your time wisely. So I think that was really great.
You have just a great way of explaining science because your personality really comes through, and the students have a very positive reaction to that. Like when you did the all-school seminar and you were crushing the small things, I was just amazed that people were cheering and wow, this is the most fascinating thing they've ever seen. I was I really need to try something like that, get a microwave out in my class or something. It was you really have a good way of engaging with students. It was very impressive. And also tutoring, you got a lot of good feedback with your tutoring. One thing I would like to have seen today would be your personality come out a little bit more in your presentation today. I know you were really nervous, but I know that you're just really an engaging presenter. Overall, though, I know how hard you worked for this project, and I think that you did a great job today. So thanks, John.
Hey, John, good job up there. Sorry for the wait. We're having some technical difficulties. That's a long time to wait up there. So I like this project. I think you really did a good job with this project. And I think the strength is really your relatability. I was writing here that I think famous scientists have one that are known publicly, that we recognize most of the time, have one thing in common, and that's the ability to make complicated concepts easy to understand. And you watch something on Albert Einstein, the people you're watching seem to relate. So I think you really do that well. I think it's a really super strength, and then your passion for science comes across. So that's a really one of the things you overcome it is
students always want to do videos in their project. Video is harder than it looks, right? And so to do 30 of them, no matter what they are, is hard. And the edits you did and stuff,
On YouTube, you don't have to do very polished videos. That's sort of half the point. So when I saw you want to do that, I knew that was going to be hard. You're going to learn from that, but you pulled it off. Now, I think you mentioned this, but you mentioned in your notes in your binder that half of your videos were done in March. So that's not ideal, right? And why did that happen?
I think it was in the beginning of the year, so like October, November. Yeah, like last year, whenever I was getting started, I think it was just my thinking of trying to get a video that's really, really good, like looks good. But I think I remember talking this with Mrs. Moyer, and Mrs. Moyer just said, just get a video out. And so I think that was at first that was kind of my obstacle that I needed to overcome. But then later on, I think I had like the Oscar seminars going on, and I was planning on filming it and putting that on my YouTube channel as well. And so I think it was just, I just wasn't scheduled enough to like plan that ahead and then get videos out for that, and then have other videos for my other videos, like non-Oscar seminar videos. I think it was just because of that. And I was very not organized in that department, yeah.
Well, I'm going to say two things about that. One is that 30 videos is a lot. So I can look at that and say you only have half of them done in March. I can also look at it and say you have 15 done throughout the year. I'm going to choose to say that because 30 videos is a lot. I'm actually amazed that was in your, I noted that, and I can hardly believe I put that on there because I let you, because that's, I think you must have convinced me that you do that pretty easily, because I usually don't let people do 30 videos. I guess that includes street physics, LTL experiments, and tests. Okay. On the other hand, I will say that the sooner you learn that, the more effective it would become. In other words, what would if you had done those videos the same amount of work, and this is part of the strength and timeline that we kind of encourage, if you'd done that same amount of work earlier, what you'd be doing is racking up views right now. That will be like compound interest. It would just be there doing work for you. Those videos would be working for you without you doing anything on them. And they would be, you would learn that faster. But I will say this, doing that many videos is impressive. So thank you for that. And they were good videos. They were interesting videos. They weren't just, what would you say about starting earlier in your timeline? What would you tell other students about starting earlier? And in our mind, that's a big deal, and it is. But in our mind, we can't really. To us, it's just a documentary. So, so I think there's a lot more to your project than even you showed, and I appreciate that. The laid plan for wheel destruction, that's, Jared already talked about that. So by the time it gets down to me, I say, that's a good learning stretch to do that. You averted disaster there by probably about a foot in a day. And so, but that's kind of the process. And hopefully you learn from that. I don't mind when things like that happen because that's stressful and that teaches you something not to do again, right? But, and at the same time, the key there, I think Jared has already stated this, but is that you took ownership of the mistake. If you take ownership of a mistake, it will cover up a multitude of errors. If you don't take ownership, things get bad everywhere, particularly here. But, you had a late plan, and I get that, so I appreciate you. If you had more professional context in the early on, and if you did the videos a little bit sooner, your project would have started to build itself, and you'd have gotten much more benefit. You put a lot of work in this project, and so I appreciate that, and I think the students enjoyed it. Again, I think that a lot of things we did are harder than it looks. to us. And I love that steel drum video because I like the egg thing too. That's interesting to me. Because that's not, I would never have understood how hot that barrel was. In fact, I watched it. When I saw it again this morning, I thought, that barrel is hot. To make an egg. So it was on some kind of boiling thing, right? It was on some kind
It was like on a butane gas thing. It's a stove, portable stove.
All right, so I know your parents are watching, so hi from America. You did a great job. I'm really proud of you for a project. You did a hard project, and you did a lot of work, and so I appreciate all you did. Good job.